In lesson 29, we're looking at some different strategies in order to multiply decimals. And some of it is a recap from mod 1 at the beginning of the school year, but we're also going to take a look at it as far as how we've been multiplying fractions also. First one here, they're talking about using like unit form. And this says 9 divided by 1/10. Well, the thing is, we know how many tenths are in a whole. And we know there are 10 tenths in one whole. So if there's 10 tenths in one whole, that means there would be 9 times as many in 9 wholes. So it would be 90 tenths. So 9 divided by 1/10 would be 90 tenths. In B here, once again, we know there's 10 tenths in one whole. So there would be 6 times as many in 6 wholes. So that'd be 60 tenths. Now, on D, we now have a mixed number. We have a whole number and a decimal. So what they're doing is they're breaking it up. And basically what they're doing, they're saying we're going to take 12 divided by 1/10. And we're going to add on to the 8 tenths divided by 1/10. So we know as far as tenths go, there's 10 tenths in one whole, so 12 wholes would be 120 tenths. And as far as tenths and eighths, there's 8 tenths, or be 8 tenths and 8 tenths. So there would be 128 tenths and 12.8 tenths. Now, a quick way how to check this. Okay, we know 12.8. If I write that, I can see that 8 is in the tenths place, so that'd be 128 tenths as a fraction. Okay. All right, for E, there are blank hundredths in one whole. Okay, well, we know there's 100 hundredths in one whole. So if there's 100 hundredths in one whole, there's going to be 3 times as many for 3 wholes. So it'll be 3 hundredths. In F, once again, we know there's 100 hundredths in one whole. So 7 wholes will be 7 times as many, so it'll be 7 hundredths. On G, we're going back to a mixed number again. So it says 4, how many hundredths in 4 wholes? Well, we know there's 100 hundredths in one whole, so it's going to be 4 times as many, so it's 400. And as far as tenths, if I was to write this in tenths, but we're looking at for hundredths, so I'm going to place a 0 here, and I can see there's 70 hundredths and 7 tenths. So that means we'd have 470 hundredths in 4.7. Now on H, once again, 11 wholes, so it's going to be 11 times as much as one whole, so it's going to be 110 hundredths. And we're talking about 3 tenths. If I write 3 tenths here, but I'm talking hundredths, that would be 30 hundredths. That would mean we would have, excuse me, that means we would end up with 140 hundredths and 11.3. That doesn't make sense. Something happened wrong here. Let me take a look. Well, let's take a look. Let's see, if we're talking about hundredths, if we take this and we write it out to the hundredths, we should have had 1130. So I made a mistake here because it's hundreds. That's why it's 100 times as many. So it should have been 1100, which now we would have had 1130. Now see how sometimes it's good to double check yourself, because I almost made a mistake there. But writing it out and going to the place value and reading it as a whole number was a way for you to double check yourself. All right. Now instead of doing it by place value, let's go ahead and change them into fractions the way we've been doing it. So we know 2 divided by, and this is 1/10, so I'm going to write it as a fraction 1/10. And we know now that we can get the same answer by multiplying by its inverse. The opposite of 1/10 is 10. So it would be 20. So our answer is 20. 23 divided by 1/10 is the same as 23 times 10, which equals 230. 5 divided by, now this is 1/100th, is the same as 5 times 100, which equals 500. Now we're coming to a mixed number, but using this strategy, we don't have to break it apart, because I can see right now this 7.2 is actually 72 tenths. And we're going to divide that by 1/10. And we know we can do the opposite by 72 tenths times 10. Now, if I were to write this out, I would do 72 times 10 over 10. And that shows us that we could take out the tens, and that would give us 72, because we're multiplying and dividing by a power of 10. 51. So now I have a whole number 51 divided by 1/100th, which is 51 times 100. And we know that would be 5100. Under F, we got 31 divided by 1/10. So it'll be 31 times 10, which equals 310. Under G, we have 231 divided by 1/10, which is equal to 231 times 10, which equals 2,310. Now next, once again, now I've got a mixed number, but I'm going to read this like so, and I know that's 437, and the 7 is in the hundredths position, divided by 1/100th. Now when I change it around, I got 437 over 100 times 100, which equals 437 times 100 over 100. We take out both hundreds, and we end up with 437. Our last one, once again, I'm going to read this as a whole number, 245 tenths divided by 1/100th. And I'm going to change it over to 245 over 10 times 100. When you rewrite that, you can go 245 times 100 over 10. And I know 10 will go into 10 one time, 10 goes into 100 10 times, and that would equal 2,450. Giovanna is charged 1 cent for each text message she sends. Last month, her cell phone included a $12.60 charge for text messages. How many text messages did Giovanni send? So let's start with a tape diagram. And we know the total here is $12.60. Now it says she gets charged 0.01 or 1 cent for every text. And we don't know how many texts she has. So by this drawing, we can see we got $12.60, and we're going to divide it by 0.01. Now, if I rewrite this as a fraction, I get 12. Now, I can do 1,260 hundredths, or I can do 126 tenths. So I'm going to go to the tenths. Divided by 1/100th. We change that, that's 126 tenths times 100 over 1. Now when we rewrite that, that's 126 times 100, over 10, because 10 times 1 is 10. I know 10 will go into 10 one time. 10 goes 100 10 times, which leaves us with 1,260 over 1, which gives us 1,260. So we know that she had 1,260 texts. Geraldine solved a problem. 68 and 5/10 divided by 100 equals 6,850. Ralph said this is wrong because a quotient can't be greater than the whole you start with. For example, 8 divided by 2 equals 4. 250 divided by 5 is 50. So who is correct? Well, we've done this a couple times now, and they use a specific example here why they thought Geraldine was incorrect. And they're saying is because the quotient, which is here, is larger than what they started with, which is the dividend. So let's do this. If I take, let's say, 10, and I divide that by 2, I get 5. So this is what they are saying here. This is what Ralph is saying. But if I take 10 and divide it by 1, I get 10. Okay, so you notice it is equal to each other. And if I take 10 and divide it by, let's say, 1/10, okay, which would be 10 divided by 1 over 10, which is less than 1, I'd end up with 10 times 10, which equals 100, which is way bigger than I started with. So Ralph is wrong. Because he's saying you will always, he didn't say always, but he's just saying that your dividend should always be smaller than your quotient, and that is not true. That would only be true if you are dividing by a whole number greater than 1. The price for an ounce of gold in September 23, 2013 was $1,326.40. A group of 10 friends decided to equally share the cost of 1 ounce of gold. How much money will each friend pay? So let's take a look at our tape diagram. And we know the total cost here was $1,326.40. And they say that 10 friends, so we know there's going to be 10 of them, and we don't know how much each are going to pay. So basically, what we have now is $1,326.40 divided by 10. Okay, so we're not really working with a fraction here this time. We could, okay, but if you look at it, if I go, let's go ahead and turn this into a fraction, because I could turn this into a fraction, be 1, 3, 2, 6, 4, and since the 4 is in the 10th position, I'm going to put it there. And this is divided by 10. Notice this is a whole number, so I do not have to but this is 10 over 1. So if I'm dividing by this fraction now, what I have to do is 13,264 over 10, and I want to multiply, so I'm going to flip it around to 1 over 10. So we'd end up with 13,264, and 10 times 10 is 100. So that's going to tell me this 4 has to go in the hundreds place. So 13264, and the 4 has to be in the hundreds place, so it'd be right here. So each person right here would have paid $132.64. Now let's check, let's see if that's true. Because if I have $132.64 and we have 10 people investing, if I have that, I have 4, 6, 2, 3, 1, and I have to put 2 place values back in because the decimal place right there, I got exactly what I started with.